It asked me to create two, I put comments in it, I create two users and to place them within a group under finance.
Yeah, but you can't add the finance for the privilege,
Yeah.
but you just have to do it individually.
So my issue was not the group itself, it was the users. I guess like, cause I have all of mine installed into my USB, like even my VMs. So I guess like a previous,
You put a policy on it, it won't let you without the password.
so I
Yeah,
couldn't-
so you just have to give those user a complex password.
Yeah.
And then once that does happen, then your user is created.
I remember I think I messed with it and I don't remember what I put it as, cause I was like, maybe I could change it to be, 10 characters or 16 characters and then do this, do that. and I just
Yeah,
left
so
it.
and you can go back and undo the policy. And that takes like, usually it updates it in a few minutes. But if you keep the policy, then you just gotta make sure that you give them a strong password.
I was able though to use previous users. I even like listen to.
That's fine. Yeah, as long as you understand why it's happening though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Caption. Okay, so today, we have a few things. Sorry, let me get to the screen. As I don't require, mandatory attendance today. You do have a short quiz that's due the end of the week. There is a review game for the quiz. So you can try the review game. Make sure that you submit the screenshot for extra credit for that one. And then we have an extra credit lab. This has got added. It is a newer lab, right? So I want to spend the time to kind of give you some demonstration. I did make a couple of changes to the document as I was looking through some of the steps, right? So make sure that you download the document, but we'll show you where the fix is. And the final exam is going to be based on all the units that we covered. So I put a video for the final review. You can find that there. And then it is not required for submission. So you should download it, go through the questions first. If you get stuck on the questions, you can then go to the video. So use it as a study guide. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we are gonna go through some of the steps. And I'll explain to you how you can set up a VPN server on your system. Ideally, this is done on one machine and your client can be on another machine. So if you use virtual machine, you can connect them together, but this won't be fully effective because we don't have a public IP and we don't actually have an interface for the server environment, but I want to show you how you can set it up. If you want to set up the virtual machine to be talking together, you can set up internal network in the networking tab for VirtualBox, but make sure that they are on the same subnet so that way the IP address is in the same range, so that way you can have them communicate. But we'll go through and use Kali. You can use any Linux that is Debian based, so you can use Ubuntu. This tutorial is based on Ubuntu tutorial for OpenVPN. You can find that online. I modified it quite a bit because it works with the prior version and there's some changes in Linux. So download Kali. And here's my download. Make sure we right click. And we would use 7-zip to extract the files. Once that happen, you're going to open up your VirtualBox. And before you load it, you want to give it a little bit of RAM. So Here's my virtual box. We're gonna click add. Locate my downloads extracted folder. And add the VBox file. You can keep the same setting and run it, but it's gonna be kind of slow. So we want to give it more RAM by going into system and give it 8,000. Processor, you can give it 4. I actually wrote another part to this with creating Ubuntu machine and setting up the client system, but it would be a lot lengthier. So maybe for another class. So once I set that up, I'm gonna run. So click start. So I did the first part and now I'm waiting to log into Kelly. So when you're using OpenVPN, this is a way that you can set up your own virtual private network. It uses PKI, which is public key infrastructure. So you would see that when you go through the process, you're going to have RSA key generated for your certificate. So we're going to use SSL TLS certificate, and this uses encryption. So it is stronger in that it's going to give you the protection that you need in how the server and the client can communicate. So assuming that we are going to do this VPN server for our company, we would set up a server system, let's say our Linux system. And for the other machines, like if we're using a Linux system or Mac OS or Windows, you just need to make sure that those keys and things are shared. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. That's okay. So the two components that you need to know when you set up VPNs is that when you're working with things like OpenVPN, you need to make sure that you have a certificate, which is a public key and a private key for the server and the client. So each of the system would have its own set of keys, okay? So just think about these two keys are going to be used for encryption and decryption, and that is used for the certificate itself. And we are going to set up the certificate authority. This is like, think of it like a way that we would be able to manage our certificate is through the CA. And the CA is also going to be managing the key that's associated with the certificate. Okay, so in order to have access, you have to have the keys, and the keys are associated with the certificate. So that means that we are going to make sure that the client would have a certain set of keys that's generated for the client, and the server is going to have its own certificate and keys. And by those things, once the systems use those components to authenticate, it's going to establish a secure communication channel between one and the other system. Okay. So you are going to need to install those components in order for the server to have the proper certificate and keys. So once we have Kali up, we're going to log in. And then here, let me pull this up. So you always start your system. Normally, I recommend doing upgrade, but for the time, you can just do update on this one. So we're going to do a sudo apt update and put in our password. Now, anytime that you're dealing with certificate authority, or if you're dealing with encryption, you need to be at root level. So this is when we actually access the system at root. You can use Kali user or the user that's not a root user, but you gotta make sure that you're on using sudo. So I put down most of the instruction in sudo, but it's probably good to elevate the privilege as root. So that way you don't have to get the confusion between the directory. So if you happen to close your terminal, just make sure that you get back to the root. So I want to do sudo su, which is super user. So I want to be able to elevate myself as a super user. So for the next part, I need to install OpenVPN, but with easy RSA. RSA is going to be used for public key infrastructure, so your PKI. So this needs to be installed. Now on the client system, you only need to install OpenVPN. And once you already created on the server, the certificate and the client, when we get to that section, we'll see, you are going to simply copy those files over to the client system and it should be able to access it. Okay. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to do a sudo apt install OpenVPN. And we're going to do easy RSA and /y so we don't have to type in yes later. So this is going to allow us to create keys and create certificate. It's basically an application that we use with OpenVPN. So it's the package of OpenVPN. Okay, so you can have more than one client and you simply manage their certificate and keys and through the directory etc and OpenVPN. So what we will do is we are going to, once we downloaded and completed the installation, you are going to access this. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste it just to make it easy. So you're going to have the make CA directory, and that's gonna allow us to be able to access this directory for our certificate. So once we already have that, what we're going to do is we're going to access the subdirectory, which is where we can generate the PKI, the keys. So you got to make sure that you open those folders. Oh, sorry, I forgot sudo su. So if your permission is denied, it's because you're on as a regular user, so you have to be a root user. So once I have accessed this, I'm going to go ahead and create the keys. So this is going to build the private and the public key. Okay, so here it tells me that it created the directory for PKI, and it's going to be under the easy RSA under vars. So once I have this, I initialize the PKI directory. I'm going to build my certificate using the next command. And it's going to ask you for a strong passphrase. So your certificate keys, and the keys is only effective as how you maintain and keep the security for the key. So we want to use a strong passphrase here. And you just type. And then confirm. So once you have that, what's going to do is it's going to use that passphrase to set your certificate So whenever that you need to encrypt, right? When you use encrypt, it's going to require you to have that authentication. You have to know the passphrase to encrypt and decrypt. Okay. So because it's key pair, one key is going to lock, the other key is going to unlock. So that way, in the case that one key is jeopardized, they cannot unlock the message. So what you want, it's telling you here that it's going to generate, right? So now what it's going to do is it's going to ask for a common name. So what you want to do is you can put in the server name or some kind of common name. So we're going to use Kali VPN. And it's going to create the certificate. So ca.crt. I'm going to screenshot this real quick because I want to show you that it has to match with the other part. Okay, so on the 19, it asks you, what is the file path? So it tells me here that my certificate is in etc, OpenVPN, Easy RSA, PKI. Hi.
Are we supposed to be in class today or?
It's open, so you can do catch-up lab today, or I'm going over the extra credit lab right now.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But it's no attendance mandatory.
Okay. I'll just have a seat.
Yeah, if you want, you can say. If not, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so the certificate file, it says that it is ca.crt, and it's located in this directory, right? I created that certificate. So now, once I have that, I know that my path is this. Why is that important? Because in the case that if you need to find it later, right, you just need to go to the directory here and be able to look at your certificate. And we can make it, by default, it's going to generate it for hundreds of days, and you can modify the certificate itself. Basically, we can also remove the certificate, so it's always good to know where that is on your server. So now I have a certificate. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to generate the key pair. So the command for this is we are going to do a genrec Kali VPN, right, which is your server common name. And then we're going to do a no pass on that. So here it says, we need to input in the common name, right? And we can put in Kali for the DN name. So this could be your server name or your user. So we're just gonna do Kali. And here it tells me that this is the rec file, which is also located in the etc, the subfolder, like what you've seen, but notice that it's going to be in REQS directory. And then for my private key, it's going to be here. So we created the certificate. Now we're going to, we just created our keys, and our keys are going to be used for lock and unlock, right? So what you want to do here is you should screenshot or record this path, so that way in case you need to manage your keys later, you can. So my DN information is there. And I would have the path and my key information. Then what we're going to do is we're going to generate parameters for Diffie-Hellman. RSA algorithm uses prime numbers. So it's, basically we're going to implement the algorithm for the server for the PKI. And this is going to generate the parameter. So it will create a certain size file, right? that would give you the length of the parameter generation for your key. So this is particular to Diffie-Hellman algorithm.
The key is always generated.
Yeah, so the key is generated once you tell it to generate. It doesn't auto-generate. Yeah, when you create the keys here, that's when you create when it generates the key. But in order for you to apply it with the algorithm, you have to generate the parameters. Those are just values that can be used for the key generation.
And I was trying to look to see if I can actually access the folder that is located. It's locked, so I can't even.
You have to be as a root user, so you have to do sudo su. Yeah, you cannot be as a regular user. Only the admin or the root user can. Yeah, so yeah, you have to, so once at the beginning it tells you to sudo su. Yeah, otherwise it's gonna say permission denied. And you don't want to change the folder permission for that because only the root level is supposed to modify or generate keys and certificate. Now, so here, what it does is it's generating the perimeters for Diffie-Hellman, which is the algorithm, right? And this is going to be 2048 megabyte, which gives you, I'm sorry, bit. So that's going to give you the length, right, of prime numbers. So basically, these are the amount of prime numbers that it generates for that particular algorithm. And then at the end, it's going to create a file that's called PEM. If you use SSH, similarly, when you create any kind of keys, you would see some kind of file like this for parameters, PEM. So it tells you here that the size created for these keys, for these private and public key, is 2048 bit, right? But in other algorithm, you can also have longer sizes or larger sizes, I should say.
That's in kilobytes.
It's in bit. Yeah, so it's fairly small. So it tells you at the beginning here how much it created. Let me go all the way up. Right? It says 2048 bit long safe prime. Then next, we're going to create a certificate for the server. So we created the keys. Now we're going to do a signed rec for the server and the client after that. And we just read this information. It tells me that, oh, the certificate is going to be expired in 825 days by default, right? This is defaulted based on the template of the application. And the common name that we gave it earlier was Cali. So we just have to type in yes to confirm right here. And it asks you to put in your passphrase for the one that we had for our CA key earlier that we created in the prior step. So we would come back to this passphrase. So now we have a certificate for the server, and that's going to last us until August 2026, 825 days. Okay. So you would see that this is a CRT file because it's a certificate, right? And it tells you this is where it's stored. So I like to screenshot this. So in the case I need to know where that is, I can always find the path. So you can always CD into these folders, and then you can find a certificate. But you can answer the question, so I'm just gonna put my screenshot right there so I can come back and you can find the answer on the output there. Okay. Then now what we're gonna do is we are going to create the keys and the certificate for the client. So if you have 5 clients, you're gonna make 5 set of certificate and keys for your clients. And then what you can do is you can copy the key and the certificate to their system, right? Once you create it from the server, and be able so that way if they need to connect through virtual private network, they simply just use the key. It's kind of like if you want someone to access your guest house or your house or your vacation home, right? You would give them a set of keys to the home, but also like some form of identification. So in case someone asks, you allow them to access. So you have to have a certificate and the key for each client. So you can say client 1, client 2, client 3, and so on, however you want to name it. So at this point, at step 24, I'm gonna go ahead and now, right, create a certificate for my client. And it tells me that, so what we're gonna do is we're going to use a common name. You can name it anything you want. You can say Cali client or Cali, whatever you want. So this, it tells you here, it says that you're about to be asked to enter some information. This is gonna be for the DN. So earlier we named our DN, right? Your distinguished name as Cali. You can also, so I put down Cali, but if you want, you can just call Cali client if you wish. Okay. And so here it's gonna put in the rec, which is used for the key. So this is gonna be used for your private and public certificate request file. These are the files for your keys. So screenshot that. So this is for the client now, right? And then once I have the certificate, I'm gonna go ahead and, oh yeah, I think we're just gonna do the key next. And we just want to proceed with yes. So since I named my common name, right, or my distinguished name as Cali client, it's gonna show that here. So whatever that you give it as identification for the DN, it's gonna show here. So we're just gonna type in yes. And then we're gonna put in our passphrase. So I have a certificate. And I have the key. And just like the other one, it's gonna expire in 825 days. By default, the template is created that way. So if you want to modify this, you have to modify the template, which we'll get to in the next part. So here I put that after you created the client keys and certificate, you need to copy the CRT files, right? The CA CRT and the client CRT to the client system. So however you wanted to do that, you can securely transmit it over a communication channel where you encrypt your email and send that. Or you can physically transfer it over the network with encryption. But whatever you do, you gotta make sure that it's securely, right? Exchange. That means that the communication information, because if they sniff this out, right, basically they can access your client account or virtual private network authentication. So you don't want that to happen. And we use VPN for a lot of things, for remote work, for, configure things, for, directly connecting to a certain system. So, okay, so once that happens, right, and all you have to do is install OpenVPN on your client computer, right, whether it's Windows, Mac OS, or Linux, and then just gotta make sure that these files are stored. And then what you would do is you would use the certificate and keys to connect to the server, which allows you to have authentication. You can set up also individual authentication accounts, but this ties to their authentication to VPN connection. So it's kind of like if you use the web-based VPN, right? You gotta log in, and in that process, it's using, TLS or SSL certificate like this in the back. It's exactly that, but through the web server. Okay. All right, so once we have the client certificate and keys, we're gonna now try to look at some of the example, the sample configuration file that comes with the application, so you can modify it so that way it matches. Keep in mind that these are templates. They don't necessarily mean that your virtual private network is fully working. It's just using a template for your to customize your settings, and then you can launch the template. So there are many different templates that they created so that way you can save time. So this part is just to show you how you can modify the templates for your needs. Okay. So what I need to do is I need to access these templates or the sample files. And so basically LSL give us a detailed list of the sample configuration file in the example for OpenVPN. So these conf file right here. So if you want to set this up for home use, right, you would go in and look at that template, the home.conf. If you want to do this for your office use using TLS, you'll go and use this configuration file, right? And there are other things like for your client configuration file and so on. So this allows you to have like a customized virtual private network capability through the software. But you have to be on as root. You see that? No other user. So we have a bunch of files. You can count up the number of files that are listed there. It tells you 64 right at the top. I forgot to add the slash before the USR. So if you download it before class, make sure you add CD/USR. So these are two separate commands. The CD, we're going to change the directory into the sample configuration file so we can customize it for our own needs. Okay, so we're going to access those directory. And notice now that I'm in the file path. So once that happened, I'm going to go ahead and access the template server configuration file, right? That's called my server. So this is one entire command. Both of those 2 lines. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy the my server configuration file. I'm sorry, the server conf to my server configuration file. So we're gonna make a copy of it. We don't want to modify the original template. We're just gonna create a copy of it. Then after that, we're gonna go ahead and access it. So we're gonna move back to our regular virtual private network package folder. And so now we're inside those folders. Remember that we copied the server file and made it into the my server. So now we're gonna try to access it. At this point, if you don't know if it's there, you can always do ls. Right? You see how we copy it and it's here, right here? Right? So that template, we copy it from the application template, the sample, and we put that here. So now what we're gonna do is once we know that it's there, we're gonna access it. So you're just gonna nano into it and modify it. So text editor gives you the capability to edit your configuration file. So that's what it looks like. So you have to kind of move down a quarter way and you're gonna look for this section. What we're gonna do is, because we're customizing a template into our own configuration, we're gonna refer back to our screenshots, right? This is why I had to use screenshots. So if you look, we're gonna make sure that this match, our certificate for our server match, and our key match. So you can always go back, disregard the client part. We're gonna scroll all the way up. Hello. So we have the certificate, Kali VPN, right? The key, Kali VPN, and then the ca.crt. So we just gotta make sure that those things, get placed into the configuration file. Did you need them for a second or me?
Yeah, you use it.
Okay, give me
For
1 second.
CyberLink, that's on Thursday. If there's students that want to attend, if we can have them register for it.
Bye, have a good night. Okay, so we're here. We're supposed to go into this configuration file. And you just, a good way to remember, if you have a really long configuration file, you can do a search, right? I think I told you guys about this before, but if you hit Control W, think of W as in where, right? I always remember that in Nano, if you do Control W, like where is something, right? You can see how it pops up the little search right here. And if I want to look at like CRT, see how I press enter and it goes to that section. So you don't have to scroll down forever because it could be a very long configuration file. So it takes me directly to that first line that contained that search criteria. Okay. So we would have the CRT like this. And then I just simply move down to here and I modify the template. So I want to put in my certificate information that is matching. And then the same thing with the next one. For my server, right? Make sure it's for the server. And then remember that the DH file that I have earlier, so I want to double check, right? The PEM file, this is why you should screenshot so that way you can go back. The rec key. the search. I don't know if yeah, I think I did, right? Oh, maybe I didn't. So you just gotta make sure, I'm pretty sure it's like a DH. So I'm gonna check out this. And make sure that it matches the one that I created. So dh.pem. PM. Once I'm done, Control X. It asks me, do you want to save? Press Y, yes, and enter. So now we had modified the copy template. And then what we're going to do is we are going to now generate the TLS keys. Remember that earlier we only created the public and the private key. Now we're going to create the encryption key for TLS. Think of it like when you're using HTTPS, right? When you authenticate, it encrypts using TLS on the web server that you're accessing to pay your bill. So in order to generate the authentication, it would require the keys. So in order to do this for authentication, this is the TA key. This is specifically for authentication, for login to the VPN. You're going to use this command for gen key. So we're going to do the server key first for the TLS. And it's going to give me, this is my key information. Now you can do it several ways if you want to. If you don't know how to use gen key, you can do a -- help like this. And it's going to give you all the sub option, right? Like it goes on for a long time. So if I want to know how to see, and you can go in here to read, it says this is a way that we can generate authentication key for TLS certificate. And then you can use a V2 for the client key. That's a little different than your server key. You can also use TLS crypt V2 client, and you can put it into a file. So that way, remember that we have to share the key with the client. So you can make it for the server and you can make it for the client. So we can put it into a file and then copy that file to the client system. So this, what I just did, right? I created a generic key, a static key. Okay. And it tells me this is version 1. So that will be for the server. So screenshot this, right? It's lengthy, but because that's the algorithm that we use. And then we're going to make a client key next. And you notice that it's different, right? It is 2048-bit static key. That's your key length is this size, right? Remember what we talked about encryption. Cryptography is effective if your key size is long enough because it just takes longer to crack the key. Also your key, how it's saved, right? How safe is it? How secure do you maintain your key? And if you compare, they are different. See, the values are different. So take a screenshot of that. You have other options instead of using those. Now what we're going to do is we are in these directory. We're going to move back to this directory. So when you're in the inside folder, you want to only access the outside. You're going to do a CD space ... to move back one level. Right? See? I'm on the inside folder. Now I'm just on the outside folder. And then I'm going to access. So if you want to know its content, do an ls. and it's lengthy. So I'm looking for sys control config file. That file. So I know that it's there. So I just gotta nano into it. sysctl dot conf. So here's the configuration file. And what we're gonna do is you can modify a lot of things. So for example, you can uncomment this line, right? Which allows you to filter based on the default settings. So they already created these line of script for you. You just gotta, like, if I want to synchronize my cookies for TCP, I just remove the hashtag for that line, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go down and we're gonna look for the forward. This one, right? Not very far, you just go down a little bit. So the net IP version 4, IP forward is 1. That's mean it's yes, right? So just move to the left and backspace. Make sure that the font is changed. After you uncomment it, then you're gonna save. But you can do more, right? Like I said, you can go down if you're using IP version 6, then you can uncomment that one. And then, you know, if you're doing like Echo, ICMP, and other things, set up your gateway. There are tons of stuff that you can use. As far as the network communication between your virtual private network and, you know, the information that's being disclosed, forwarded, or, you know, filtered, right, is in this configuration file. So we're going to do Control X to save, yes, Y, and press enter. And then once you have modified, but keep in mind that we don't have the networking configuration fully, right? We don't have a public IP address to route information into our system. We don't have a router that's connected to this virtual machine. You know, there are a lot of missing components. Simply, we just modify a template and run the template. So just keep in mind that, you know, you're only partially done with the configuration. I'll show you where you can find some additional tutorial for setting up the rest of this, but I had to modify and massage this quite a bit based on the tutorial. So just to let you know that, you know, there are a lot more into this than just, you know, setting it up and install. So here it tells you that when you reload this is minimum for configuration for the template. And you're using the default configuration file with some modification. So even when you do this, right, you might run into, you know, error, or it's not fully functional, but you can take a look at the details and then complete the rest. Okay, but a big chunk of it is done. So I want you to understand that you have to have certificate, you have to have keys in order to establish a virtual private network, and for both sides, for the systems that are offering the service, the server and the client system. So what we're going to do is we are going to use the configuration file. Now it tells me, remember that when I uncomment that, right, it's going to do an IP forward for the version 4 for the network. And then we're going to check the status. So here it tells me that the status of this, right, it is connecting to my DN, my unique name here for my system, Kali VPN. So that was in our configuration file that we modify, remember? But it's telling me that the service fully is disabled. It is inactive, it's dead, right? And then for additional, so you can go to these links on and be able, so we can do Control C here to get out, or you can read additional lines. And then what we can do is we can look at the journal. So this is gonna give you additional details, right, of the templated information. VPN service. Huh. I guess it doesn't. There's no entry. When I tested this yesterday, it actually have a little bit more detail. So let me see. Yeah. So the connection is inactive anyways. Okay, so it tells you to check the journal. So this is not fully established. So now basically you can still, you install the service. You just gotta activate it. So if you want to learn more about this to set up the rest, right? You can go to Ubuntu, OpenVPN, and this will pop up. So here, right, this is one part, you see? And then there are other components and tutorials that you can use. But the majority of this we kind of did. I massaged this a little bit. I fixed some of the problems. There's a similarity in the steps. So we did this, right? We did this part. And then when we did this to reload the system control, so it tells you here that this is the minimum that you can use, the default setting for that to start the server, but it tells you here that the system control start OpenVPN does not start your virtual private network. It's defined, right? You need to also modify additional information here based on the templated services. And then when we did this part, there's no entry. So if everything is routed and working, you should see something like this. You're actively running. See how they have the route? And they have the interface for connecting to the external IP addresses through the route. So that's ideally, once you set up the network, it works like that. Okay. And then on the client side, this is where you can follow the step on the system that's connecting. You can set this up very similar to the server, but you only need to use OpenVPN and then modify the configuration file to match your server because you copy those files over. So to match your files. Bye. Okay. Okay. So that gives you additional resources that you can practice. So once we get there, right, Control C, and then we just, for the extra credit, that's enough. Oh, shut down now. And then there are also other resources that you can use.